Chapter 5. A red haze fills Zukail's vision, frustration born from whoever holds him down, and anger towards whoever this is, who kills this beautiful human specimen in front of him. She wasn't just a decent person, sure she sold stolen goods, but there were worse people out there. She is just an innocent woman trying to make it in the city. He is able to control himself, as he fuels his arms and legs with blood, increasing his strength, flopping his arms loose to try to placate those who felt their power over him. The seconds ticked by as he is able to once again take a look at the woman in the chair, helpless of the murderer behind her. Zukail sees him loosen his grip around her neck, and walks around the front of her, raising her head to look into her eyes, still open in shock. He closes both of her eyelids with his fingers. Zukail might be a vampire, but this thing, it is a monster. Flopping his head down, in anger, figuring it is about that time, he hears.
So, now, Private Investigator Zukail, she told us of you, what are we going to do about you?
He replies in anger, growling.
There is nothing you can do about me, other than beg for mercy.
He fuels the blood power to increase his speed just past a human's capability of moving, and forces both of his arms downward with such force, that the two men holding his arms are not able to hold them as they are. He slams their hands to the ground and they are able to hold on, but only barely. Loosening their grip, he elbows the one that is holding his right arm in the face with that arm, hearing a snap of that nose. Faster than most could follow, his right fist crosses over and meets the jaw of the one holding his left arm, and his left fist came back up to swing on the same man, slamming into the right side of his skull, hearing another crack. An inhuman growl escapes his lips, as he looks towards the last man in the room, who took Patricia from this world. The man certainly looks worried at first, his face switches like he wants to back away, but as Zukail gets closer, his lips curve up into a sinister smile. With lightning speed, he crosses the distance of the room between them, and his hand swoops under Zukail's neck, lifting him off of the ground. Zukail's increase in strength is nothing to this other creature. He punches this monster's arm, and it does not bend. The enemy's canine fangs extend, showing that he is a vampire. The creature looks over at the muscle on the floor. Lifting Zukail slightly with its other shoulder, he executes a non-committal shrug. The monster smiles.
Ha! Beg for mercy, that is a pretty good one, Zukail. So you are one like us, what faction are you in?
Zukail is unable to speak, a requirement for the use of his mind manipulation. Locking eyes with his enemy, he can't get a word out to force him down, or release him. Trying to breathe, his air is caught in his throat, unable to help him. He doesn't need to breathe, but he does in order to try his luck at his own power. The monster looks into Zukail's eyes, trying to gauge his current situation, seeing plenty of emotion that is expected. He lowers Zukail a bit lower to the ground to the height where he can reach his neck with his teeth. Reaching with his other hand, he scratches with non-sharp fingernails at his neck, and smells.
Scratch and sniff, the smell of anger and fear mixed, it is sort of intoxicating, no?
He opens his mouth to take a bite.
No.
Another voice calls calmly, coming from over near the balcony window, a woman's voice. Both of them turn their heads to see a woman in the room, unseen before till now. She is wearing black jeans, a shirt, and all pretty basic for a night out. The man who has Zukail nearly a foot off of the ground protests.
Come on, just a little, I want to see how he
asks with his eyes pleading to her, something a subservient thing would do. The woman replies.
I don't remember permitting any of this.
She says this with conviction, and the finality, in the conversation. With a flick of his wrist, Zukail flies without effort to the other side of the room, landing on his butt, sliding sideways and smashing into both of the men still on the ground from his attack.
You are no fun,
cries the monster in sarcasm. Both the monster and the woman walk out of the open balcony door of the second-floor hotel, and jump off, not to be seen further. Zook looks at both of the men on the ground, one not moving, the other groaning on the ground barely twitching. He runs over to the balcony and looks out, looking around the small courtyard of the hotel. He doesn't see anyone else walking, and no one else is watching.
Son of a...
he says softly, walking over to the two men on the ground, one still fidgeting. Reaching down to the man who is still breathing, he turns him to lift him slightly off of the ground and slams his fist into the man's face, once, twice, and again. Then stops himself, realizing he probably should leave him alive if he is still as such. He looks over at the other man on the ground, and feels for a pulse, but feels nothing. He stands and staggers to Patricia, her head lying forward from her shoulders. In his mind he doesn't need to feel for her pulse, she is dead. Or, is she? Close. 2. She is in a decent position sitting in the chair. He walks behind her and kneels to reach her neck, and he is losing her. He can tell the difference between her body and one that is scared and alive, bodies shivering against him like hundreds of times before. He tilts her neck gently with one arm, and hesitates for, possibly too long, looking at her face, imagining her desire in this case. Does she want this life? Perhaps, but he doesn't have time to mull it over. He plunges his teeth into her neck, and drinks the life left in her body. It is not rushing as it normally would. She was full of life only a few minutes ago. It could be too late. Her blood is sweeter than most he has had in some time. Is it a taste, or is it something he brings to it? Interest in her? Maybe the sweat and fear she felt at the end of her life. Perhaps in his head, an ability to do some good for her, a chance to give her something out of this. She is nearly empty of blood. He stops and closes her neck wound, licking the blood and sweat from her neck. He gently lifts her head back and opens her mouth. He opens his wrist with his own teeth, giving her the life he has taken from so many others and even her own. He instinctively forces more liquid from his body than usual into his arm to feed her his hopefully life-giving mystical blood. When he feels like he has given enough, he gives her some more, feeding her possibly lifeless body more blood than needed, so much from his own blood supply in his body. Once he feels like he is nearly on the empty fuel gauge, he releases his arm, and feels like he should place her onto the couch of the hotel. In his mind, she shouldn't stay in this chair. He loosens her bonds, and carries her over to the couch. He has created other vampires before. The blood must be mostly drained and replaced. No, it isn't a science, and the person who they would wish to make into one of them requires a few pints of blood to be either drunk or forced into their mouth to run through the person's system. In this case, he did not think of it like a plague, as some might think of it, but more like a vaccine, to help this semi-innocent woman have an existence again, whatever that existence might be. She might hate him for it, she might not. If she hates it and becomes a huge problem, he would have to deal with her. From what he can tell, as an accountant, she has to have an analytical mind, over a spiritual one. Religious and sometimes spiritual people have a hard time with the change in existence, and he sort of doubts that she is either. In his experience, it would take some time for the transformed child to wake. It did take some time after her death for him to force the change for her. By the time he could attempt saving her, she was dead for maybe a minute, but there isn't really a science to this sort of thing. In this case, not only did he want to talk to her again, he did feel pretty bad about her situation. He is partially responsible for this. He told her to take the day off because she was having a difficult time coping. He probably could have gotten her some protection with him at his place, but she would have asked too many questions of him being out for the day. He could have figured something out. He pulls out his phone and calls down to Bud, telling him to get up there calmly. He needs help. He wants to take them both, to remove evidence, but especially the one who is still alive. He steals some blood from the dead man on the ground. Being dead for a bit, it is agonizingly slow to wait for the blood to gush out for him, but he gets enough. He gets a light pulse from the other, enough to feel that he is still breathing for now, and with some help, will be later on, for some enhanced interrogation. He walks over to Patricia looking like she is sleeping on the couch, a little drop of his blood trickling down her cheek. He turns her head, and brushes the blood back through her lips with a finger, her cheek a little cold to the touch. Bud and Steve come up to the hotel room, guns drawn, both with heavy hearts looking at the rest of the room. Then their eyes are drawn to the woman lying on the couch, their employer still sitting down next to the body he just newly revived, looking and feeling defeated. Zook brushes the hair on Patricia's head with his fingers, recuperating from the ordeal, and gives out directions. He tells Bud to watch for guests and not to let anyone in, and Steve to start clearing things a bit. The 3 bodies need to be carried to his car. The trunk was big enough for one of them, but not the 2 big guys, so one would need to ride up in the car with them. Taking the hotel card, he walks with them, taking the bodies one by one to his car. As they walk down the floor to the elevator, one guest does leave their room, but Zook stops her, manipulating her mind, telling her that their drunk friend is just about to get married the next day, and needs to get him home after a party. A little flimsy considering the woman sees the guy's messed up face, but that is the benefit of forcing a mind to think of something a little strange. Instead, they change direction and decide on the stairs, which would certainly make more sense. One would need to move the car closer. As they walk, Zook tells his friends that the client was killed by another vampire, like him, and he set things in motion to save her. He gets incredulous looks for that note. He glares back at them.
I don't remember asking for your opinion.
And they didn't say a word, going back to their directed task. The next body, and then Patricia, are taken down to the parking lot without someone leaving their room at a coincidental time early in the morning. Luckily, there isn't much damage in the room for it to be noticeable. There are some blood stains around on the floor in different areas. On their way back, they bring some watered-down ammonia bottles and peroxide so that the blood cannot be checked in general. Steve and Bud go back up to clean while Zook watches everyone in the car. The cleanup is done shortly after that, and Patricia's bag and toiletries are taken from the room. Other things are taken from the room also, such as the mystery rope and bats used to bash Zook's face. Once all is done, Zook has Patricia in the back of his town car with him, along with the still-alive attacker. He tries to sit her how she would be comfortable, but she won't stay seated back normally. Her head slides down the back a few times and rests on the armrest. It looks like she is drunk. They take all of the precautions, including parking far from where they are staying until daybreak a couple of hours later. It is entirely possible that those 2 were waiting, watching, or following in another car. They drive to a far parking lot, waiting until the sun comes up and protecting the back area of the car using plastic guards like you would use to close the windows of an airplane to cover the windows completely. They also use the custom-created bear traps behind each of the unused seats, and the marbles to prevent others from hiding in the leg room to make sure. Zook messages Reed, one of his known contacts within the city that can put a party together in no time. These parties of Reed's were good for guys like him to get some blood. He invites people to his party that like to be fed on by other vampires. Those people get paid, and only come when they have not been fed on for some time. He asks if Reed could set up a party for tomorrow night. There are 2 bulletproof compartments under the back seats in which to hide. Zook takes Patricia, and hides her with some help under one of them, and he takes the other. Before closing it, hoping against hope, he tries to see if her aura is active. He would be able to tell if she is faking and scared, but he gets nothing from her. He feels his phone vibrate in his pocket, but it is not easy to reach in this tiny compartment. It has only been a few hours, but he is hoping to see her wake up before sunrise, but as he is starting to drift off into the deep sleep that is his daytime pass-out, he doesn't hear any noises coming from the other side of the back compartment. The next night, Zook wakes in his tiny compartment in the back seat of his town car. He punches in the 4-digit code in the back to unlock it, and slides out. He turns on his heightened senses to listen for any activity up front. He is not hearing anything. Checking his phone, he doesn't have anything important, but he sends a message to Zant, that he needs to let her know something, asking for a discussion. She messages back saying that she can discuss things tonight. He messages back saying he needs to get something done, and asks if they can meet in the usual place around midnight. She replies back with a thumbs up emoji. He also has a message from Reed, telling him that he could have one ready for tonight, and that message is from late afternoon. He texts back, asking if the party is going on, and gets a message back that it will be in full swing at about 10. He checks the plastic guards in front of the windows and they are secured around them, with no light coming through. He couldn't be awake at this point anyway if the sun is still up, but it is something to check. The other guy who he nearly killed isn't in the car either. Still no noise from the inside of the other back seat row. He presses in the code and releases the hatch to the other compartment. Patricia's body rolls out of the hatch. Her body is still cold, but he checks for her aura, and still is not able to pick up anything. It is still just the first night, but during a day of rest, a newly embraced vampire would often wake, but there is a small chance she is still stuck in a limbo, her spirit not yet able to reach back. He will give her some more time. He definitely needs to get some blood in him though, most of his is in her, and if she wakes, she would need more, along with one of those awkward explanations. He usually dreads having the talk with new vampires, especially if they would be considered his children, but in this case, he wonders if it matters. It is sort of like people without children, who don't know what it would be like to have them, and wonder if they would be happy to have them, or feel like their life would forever change and not for the better. Then, a parent tells him, it would be different, because it is his. He texts Bud, telling him to come on out and help him. He wants to make sure no one is watching, so they can take her inside to the safe room. After a little bit of time, Bud comes out, and another 10 seconds or so, he calls the boss from about 5 feet away.
Boss, there is a cheap car waiting down the street. Steve noticed it early afternoon, and it hasn't moved. There is one man in it, and he's been drinking coffee, and on occasion looks over here. He isn't facing this direction, but we should be cautious about this. There is no garage like our other place.
Nothing to worry about there, we don't have a thing to hide. Come on in, let's head off.
Once Bud gets in, Zook whispers through the intercom.
It might be someone trying to find out more, could be a number of people. I need to go to Reed's place, I'm mostly tapped out and can't spend extra blood now. Don't try to lose them too quickly, but once we identify who this might be if we can, you can do what you can to lose them.
Zook slides Patricia back under the seat so that she will be secured in there, and buckles in. Bud pulls out of the driveway and leaves the complex slowly, and coincidentally, the car starts up and slowly follows them. He gets a short way down the road and tries to catch a glimpse of who is in the car. Trying to use the blood power to increase his senses, his eyes are nearly blinded by the lights when he tries to figure out who is driving the car behind them. This is on the straight roads though, on a few turns he might be able to catch them. He changes tactics a bit, trying to catch his aura. From what he could tell, it is full-fledged human, mega cautious, and mega scared. They are making their way in the direction of Reed's place, a few turns and Zook watches back, zooming in to try to see him around a corner while the lights are away. He catches the face of someone he did not want to see, a police officer who is asking too many questions.
Okay, I see him, go for it.
A subtle hint to try to lose him. It does not take them too long. Bud turns right multiple times, going in a circle, then turns left, and takes the next right to start the process again, and it looks like the other man takes the hint, and stops following them. He turns right once more, then left, they don't see the tailing car again. Zook states.
Hey Bud, before we get to Reed's place, look for a tracker or bug on the car. Anywhere you might put one, or that he might have put one. Use any tech we have to check for signals and such. We have to try to prevent him from following us to Reed's place.
Got it, boss.
Is the only deep-voiced reply. He pulls them over at a fast food place and checks around for bugs. Zook is able to find a bug between some of the glass jars on the bar, and Bud finds a tracker inside the bumper. Zook lets Bud know.
It is a cop, and I'll have to deal with him directly. This could get messy if I don't catch him in the near future. Get me to Reed's place, I need to fuel up, and then we have to go to the dance studio.
Bud takes him to Reed's place, a guy who not only loves to throw parties, but also gets paid pretty well to get people together, who through one circumstance or another, have become interested in being bitten. The kiss, a natural ability for almost all vampires, has a euphoric effect on most humans, and it is likely the reason vampires have lasted these centuries. If people were screaming from being bitten by vampires all the time, they wouldn't have made it long. He goes to a packed house, with Reed greeting him at the door.
Zook, what up man? I have a prime party set for you here, hope you like the entertainment.
Zook smiles, and walks on in. Nearly an hour of accepting the partygoers' blood donations, a pint here, a couple of pints there, and he is full of the life of the party. He thanks Reed for his hospitality and leaves to head to the dance studio to meet with the boss. She needs to know what happened last night, someone new is in our territory. His client being killed by this vampire, is incidental, and his problem, not if, when? He shakes his own head trying to deny that possibility. When she wakes up from the vampiric change, he would then need to do the usual. A rule is to let the boss know she's been saved to become one of them. That sort of thing happened with them from time to time. Someone would be interested in, enamored with, or motivated by other means, financial, something about them or their blood, it all took place in their decisions. The dance studio is as per usual. Pristine hardwood floors, are polished, to a stained shine, uncaring cleaning of mirrored walls, round tables surrounding the area, and the small stage in a corner. The stage is not big enough to have a show, but one to teach. Comfortable leather chairs surround each table, the decor did not match the location. The discolored paint peeling off of the walls shows the age of the location as well. The studio is less often used to teach, than to have these meetings for, the organization, within the city. Zook walks in through the front room, of the raised desk and chairs for parents or partners to wait for students. Then through that, to the larger room studio. Inside there were not many other vampires in there. The boss, Zant, has her usual security ghouls with her, Paul is there watching, with his usual intimidating, and stoic stance. Paul isn't always there by her side, he isn't just her guard, more of a general vampiric guard position, watching everyone, and everything, when something is going on, or if there were group gatherings. Might have gotten punked not long ago, but it was by a very powerful vampire, who isn't a member of the organization anymore. Otherwise, he has his stuff to do, and he also goes around the city every few days looking for straggling vampires who make their way in, trying to hunt, and not introducing themselves. That sort of thing happens on occasion as well, some vampires might be visiting, or passing through, and take a few humans to feed on to continue where they were going, he is amongst the group to try to prevent that. Zook walks through the mostly empty studio, to sit in one of the tables closest to the stage, where Zant sits, and Paul stands. He lets them know what has happened. He lets them know there is a woman, his last client, was killed by one of the attackers, and he'll let them know if she survives. That suggestion makes them know what he did. He next tells them of the vampire that held him off of the floor, and threatened him, but was ordered, or possibly directed to not do so, by a woman he also didn't recognize. He wasn't able to get a good look at her and didn't think of checking her aura, but if she could order a vampiric killer around, she likely is one as well. He describes this attacker, and let them know he would investigate the situation as well. They both nod. Xant and Paul look at each other, and ask each other if they think he'd like to know. Zook asks, so they let him know that Tina ran into a little trouble on her own. They start to give him some details, but he shrugs his shoulders when they start. He doesn't feel like she is his problem anymore. He isn't the one with a single arm or skin condition that one of the others has.